Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophets Speak. Today we continue our study of the Sefer Mishlei, that is the book of Proverbs. We are in Perek Tes Zayin, that is chapter 16. We are about to study verse 16 and study the second half of chapter 16 today. So that's verse 16, that is Pasuk Tes Zayin. The first half of this chapter were really a little bit different than some of the other recent chapters in the sense that there were two series of verses. One series that related to the relationship between God and man, where God's name was mentioned repeatedly in almost every verse. And then another series of verses that was directed to leadership, to a king specifically, but leadership in general, and how such a person should conduct himself towards the people with wisdom and compassion, etc. Today, the second half is much more similar to the other parts of Mishlei, of these chapters that we're studying now, the Mishlei Shlomo, the section of the Proverbs of Solomon, which we've been studying, I think, since chapter 11 or something like that, or 10. So it's again these kind of one-liners with, of course, some relationship from verse to verse, but still one-liners. So anyway, let's get going. Keno chachma matov mechorotz. Acquiring wisdom, it is so much better than acquiring gold. Ukenos bina, and to acquire understanding, nivchar mekasef, is more choice, is more preferable than acquiring silver or kesef could also mean money. Either way, excuse me. Idea being that wisdom is better than wealth. Now, obviously, one could say, "Yeah, this sounds like a great ideal," but of course, everyone wants wealth. But the thing is that what it really is driving in deeper. Of course, wisdom is better than wealth in the sense that it is more, more important, more everlasting, etc. But in the long run, wisdom will be much better for you than wealth. Wealth comes, wealth goes. Wisdom always gives you the tools that you need to succeed. We'll see that point being made later in this chapter and in other future chapters, and we've seen it before as well. Mesilat Yesharim, the path of the righteous. A Yashar is really someone who goes straight, the path of those who are straight in life. Sor Meira is to turn away from evil. Shomer Nafsho, one who wants to guard his soul and take care of himself. Notzer Darko is careful about his path. And the idea being expressed in this verse is really the emphasis on the Mesila being the path, the Derech meaning the way or the road, both emphasizing that and this is again emphasizing the idea which we said in the past verse, a wisdom being better than wealth. And why is that? Because wisdom leads you on the path, it shows you which way to turn as you go through this journey of life, and it's a continuous gift that never stops. You always keep on, you always have that wisdom, and you're always able to make the right decisions to move forward. It never goes away like wealth can, and wealth often and usually does. The same thing here. It's the path of the Yashar, the path of the straight, of the righteous person, is to turn away from evil. One who guards his life. If you really want to take care of yourself, you watch the path that you're going on. It's not necessarily the momentary successes and failures. I got this great amount of money now, or whatever, or this great gift, I won this thing. It's all well and good, but the main thing is the path that you're on. The overall path is what's important. Lifnei shever gaon. And the main thing you need to remember, this is verse 18, in order to stay on that path, is that before every failure is pride. And before every mistake, before every trip up, right? Gova Ruach is a person who is haughty of spirit. So haughtiness, arrogance, always precedes bad decisions and failure. a lesson which we should take very close to our hearts in our lives. Tov shval ruach es anovim, right? It is better to be a lowly of soul, and lowly of soul doesn't mean depressed and sad. It means someone who understands his true self-worth, someone who's not arrogant and haughty, and to remain among those who are anavim sometimes could mean poor and destitute. In this case, it means those who are anavim, those who are humble, among the humble. Mechalek shalol eskeim. It's better to be there than to be among those who divide the spoils. Now, spoils are by definition things that people take away from others through might and power. So it's better to be among the humble than to be among the haughty ones who are dividing spoils that aren't theirs, who are dividing spoils. They might be wealthy right now, they might have something now, but they took it from others. They through less than honest means. It's better to be among the humble than to enjoy such spoils. Maskil al davar, someone who truly understands something, Yimtza Tov, will find good. This is verse 20. That truly understanding something is the one who will find out how to make it work, how to use it, how to gain something from it, gain the appropriate things from it. You have to understand it. It takes wisdom. It takes understanding. Uvoteach b'Adonai ashrav, and one who has trust in God is that brings happiness to him. That brings now. One of the things that's so important about this verse, and it's as clear as day in this verse, but so many people miss this point. So many people think that having trust in God means not understanding. It means not thinking about how things work, not understanding what to do and how to act and so on. That as if faith in God is somehow contradicts reason and scientific inquiry. But this verse is telling us the opposite. Maskil al davar is written in the same verse here. Understanding something, that is boteach b'Adonai. That is having trust and faith in God, right? How does one trust God? By studying His works, by studying His world, understanding the way it works. That's how Yimtza Tov, that's how one finds good. And for verse 21, Lachacham leiv yikra navon. A person who is wise in the heart, yikarei navon, he will be the one that is called navon, someone who is understanding, someone who has discernment, someone who has understanding. So again, l'chacham leiv, it is wisdom that one needs. That is not a contradiction to boteach b'Hashem, to having faith in God, but that is the very definition of having faith in God. Umesek sifasayim yosef lekach, and someone who has literally that means sweetness of the lips, a person who speaks in a nice, pleasing way. This emphasizes a topic that was emphasized a lot in the last chapter 15. One who knows how to speak appropriately, speak in a calming way, that people that makes peace among people. Yosef lekach, that is the kind of person who will gain wisdom. How does that work? If you get along with other people, you will listen to them. They will feel comfortable talking to you. You will have the opportunity to learn different perspectives, to hear new ideas, new facts, and new information, etc. As a mesek svasayim, one who is pleasing in conversation, is the kind of person who gains knowledge from conversation. A person who comes in and just insists that everybody listen to him is never going to gain anything from conversation. All he's going to do is just have a chance to hear himself babble, and that'll be the end of it. Makar chayim, the foundation of life. The makor is like the spring from which life springs. Is seichel ba'alav, is the seichel, is the brains, is the mind of the ba'alav, of those who acquire it. So again, those who have this great seichel, those who have wisdom, that is the fountain of life. Again, re-emphasizing the theme that we've been saying so many times today in this section of this chapter, that wisdom is what brings success in life. Wisdom is what brings actual life and prolongs your life. Umusar avilim iveles. However, the foolishness itself is that which rebukes the fools. the fools will fall victim to their own foolishness. It is the foolishness itself which will take them down. So if you want a long, happy life, learn, study, understand, and gain wisdom. Leiv chacham yaskil piu. It is the heart of a chacham. The heart is the inner wisdom, the inner knowledge, the inner soul of the wise man. That is what makes his speech effective. In this context, yaskil here is from the language of effective. Yaskil pihu makes his mouth effective. V'al sifasav yosif lekach. And it increases the wisdom that he has on his lips, right? That which comes from his lave, that which comes from his inside, right? That is what makes his speech effective. It's similar to the phrase and saying that we find people say often. I'm not exactly sure where it comes from. Dvarim hayotzim alev, things which come from the heart. Nichnasim alev, go into the heart. When you speak from your heart, people listen, people hear. Tzuf devash imrein, which goes back, of course, to the first verse of this chapter, right? Omei Hashem ma'anei lashon, right? Right. We think, but in order for our speech to be effective, that comes from God, right? And how does that happen? How is that determined? It's determined on the well-meaningness, if there is such a word, of the speaker. And his or her wisdom. Tzuf devash imrei noam, sweet speech or pleasant words, good words said in the proper context are like dripping honey, or like the comb of honey. Masok la nefesh, it is sweet to the soul. Umarpei lo etzem, and it is healing to the bones. Yesh derech yashar lifnei ish. Just remember, I told you the importance of choosing the right road. And we remember how we said early on in this chapter and several times in other chapters how people often think they know the right way. I think if we go back to, I think it's verse 2, of this chapter. Kol darchei ish zach b'einov. All of the ways of man are clear, are straight in his own eyes. But God is the one that knows our spirit. God is the one that knows what we're really thinking on the inside. So, in other words, we always think we're on the right path, right? And I just told you the importance. We just said in verse 17 in the same chapter that it's best to choose the right path, the path that leads away from evil. The way to take care of yourself is to watch the path that you're on. But just remember that sometimes that path, it might seem to be the way of Yashar. It might seem to be, like we said before, Mesilat Yesharim, the path of the righteous, before the person. However, V'acharisa, the end of that path is really the path to death, right? V'acharisa darchei maves. So verse 25 is telling us you have to be very careful when you choose a path. Because remember, we often think, right, we know which path we're going on, but we actually don't. Now, this verse, of course, we had, we think we know that the path we're going on is the right one, but we have to be very careful because we can be tricked. And of course, as we learned so many times repeatedly, haughtiness, arrogance, unwillingness to listen to criticism and to listen to the opinions and ideas that come from other people, arrogance and the unwillingness to have awe and humility before God, that is what leads us to choose this wrong path and to think that it's the right one, but it's really the one leading to the grave. Again, of course, this verse has shown up already in chapter 14, the identical verse, so we've discussed it back then as well. I think it's verse 12. Nefesh omal amla lo. This is an interesting a verse here. The nefesh amal, the soul of he who works. Amlolo is what works for him. And what we're saying over here, it's generally understood by pretty much all the commentaries that this nefesh means the need, the desire, right? That one has, right? That an amel, that a worker has, is what works for him. A person goes to work in the morning because he has to go to work, because he needs to feed himself, he needs to feed his family. Ki achaf alav piu, because that his hunger is pushing him on. Achaf is similar, I think it's the same word as a saddle, right? In other words, it's that which pushes you, it's that which rides you off into into doing this action. So nefesh amel amlalo, it is the need or the hunger of the worker that works for him, that drives him on. So in other words, we have a need. We desire things. We desire life itself, right? That is the motivator for us to continue our actions. Ish bilial, ish bilial. Now, bilial, this word in Tanakh, almost always it refers to a person who is a boorish, rough bandit type, just a no goodnik, similar to what we maybe call a gangbanger, somebody who's just a leech on society, gets places through violence, and stealing and just being in the face of others. Ish Belial, a person who is a man of Belial, some people translate this as a useless person, or a person who's living that kind of lifestyle. Koreh Ra is always, Koreh means digging, right? But digging in the sense of like you and I might dig in order to build something, in order to make something, in order to be productive, right? Ra, but he is constantly building, but he's constantly building evil. He's constantly laying down evil. V'al sifaso ke'esh tzoraves. And what is on his lips, in contrast to the lips that we said before in the last few verses, remember in verse 24, tzuf devash imrei noam, that pleasant words are like a honeycomb. His are the opposite. What is on his lips is ke'esh tzoraves, is like a fire that burns and scorches and destroys. Ish tapucho. So this verse 27 that we just read, and the next couple verses are the flip side of the wonderful verses we read before that describe the man of wisdom, the person who chooses the right path, the person who stays away from pride. But the person who does the opposite, that's the Ish Belial. This next two verses also starts with a description of a certain type of person. The next one is an Ish Ta Puchos. So an Ish Belial was a worthless bandit, no good, boorish person. Ish Ta Puchos is a different kind of evil person, is a person who is constantly turning things over. He's constantly taking the truth and turning it upside down and making it untrue in order to stir up strife among people. The person who always walks into the room and causes there to be fights between one and another, the kind of leader who sows division in order for his own benefit. So Ish Tapuchos, a person who turns stories, and the way that's always done is through lying, is through making up stories. Yishalach Madon, he is always sending forth from his own person. It's constant fighting, constant battle. Every time he walks in, the next thing you know, everybody's fighting with each other. V'nergan, and another kind of person who's very closely related is the whisperer, the guy who's always whispering a story to this one about that one, the person who's always telling a story about how he did and she did and they did and he said and they said, constantly whispering stories and using that kind of tactic. Mafrid aluf, literally that means mafrid separates or pushes away, and aluf is an interesting word. Generally here it's considered to mean another person, just another person. But aluf is often used to mean a leader or a captain, an officer, like in a military sense. And I think that over here it's kind of it makes a lot of sense, because if anyone who has ever been in command of a military unit, or if not, if you've ever been in charge at work of a group of people, you know that the best way for someone on the team to ruin the plans of the commander is by causing strife among the people, whispering one to the other, whispering stories, making up rumors, how that ruins morale, and it causes the mission to fail. So a near gun is the worst person on the team. Mafrid aluf, he is the one who gets rid of and separates and gets rid of the captain, because he is constantly making up stories and causing strife among the people. So that was the second verse that started with an ish and described the kind of person. And then the third kind of person is ish chamas. An ish chamas is the kind of person who takes advantage of others and overpowers them, usually through might and strength, right, and takes what is rightfully theirs. And that kind of person, ish chamas yifatereu, he convinces his friend. Remember, so many times we've had verses in Proverbs that told us how one should not listen, like we just had in this chapter, how it's better that to be among the humble than to be mechalek shalol, than to divide the spoils with the haughty. Well, this is that haughty person. He invites people to come and join him to divide in the spoils. He convinces them. This goes all the way back to the beginning of Mishlei, where we were advised by Solomon, don't listen to him who tries to convince you, come join me, let's steal from others, and we'll get rich. But an ish chamas is constantly fatere, who is constantly seducing his fellow to join him in his ill-gotten gains. V'holicho b'derech lo tov, and he leads that friend, he leads that person on a path which is not good. So if you want to know if it's a bad path, if the person leading you down that path is not a good person, then you're probably on the wrong path. Otze einav lachshov tapuchos. He closes his eyes in order to think about new ways to make up stories, new ways to deceive others, new ways to lie. That person, that ish chamas, when he winks, right? When he closes his eyes, it's because he's thinking about new ways to take advantage of other people. Koreit sefasov, he twists his lips, kila ra'ah, while he is deciding how to do more evil. Ateres teferes save us. This is verse 31. Now we're going away from the topic of describing different types of evil people in the past they could lead us upon. Now this is just a general observation that the crown of glory, ateres is a crown, teferes of glory, seva is old age, right? V'derech tzedakah timatzeh, the way one achieves old age, and it is true, when one gets involved in the world of crime, and the chance of meeting an early end is very high. Most people that go into that world will eventually will not make it out of it alive. They won't live to a long life. But a person that chooses the right path rather than the quick path to riches that violence might provide, but if you choose the long road, then you'll get to old age, you'll live a long and meaningful life. But derech tzedakah timatzeh, right? If you want to reach that ateres teferes, the crown of old age, right? The way to do it is to take the path of righteousness. That's verse 31. Verse 32, Tover chapayim megibor, a person who is patient has a much better and much more important character trait than a gibor, than a powerful person. Because that person will go the long haul, just as we've been saying repeatedly throughout this chapter. It's better to be a patient and calm and learn the right path and learn how to handle each situation. It'll get you through a longer life than a person who just solves his problems with gibor, with his physical might. Umoshel berucho milo chedir, a person who has control over himself is stronger than he who conquers cities. B'chek yutales gorol ume'adonai kol mishpato. This verse is a little bit more challenging to translate. Not so much translate, but really understand the lesson, and that is b'chek. In our laps, we place the gorol, the lots, but the ultimate judgment belongs to God. And this is kind of just really a counterweight to everything we've been saying. We've been saying the importance of gaining wisdom, of being patient, of being calm, of bringing peace to our conversation, of listening to criticism and critique from others, without taking it personally, not using violence to take advantage of others. There was so much good advice that we learned. But ultimately, in the end of the show, right, we still can do everything right, right, and still not be successful. So on the end of the show, b'chek yutalis gorol, it is like we are casting lots in our laps, and we're waiting for God's ultimate judgment. In other words, it's a recognition that all of this advice is great advice, and all of this advice will usually lead and will be a much better path to take than the path of evil, the path of lies, the path of spreading rumors, the path of taking advantage of others, and so on. And we're much more likely to reach the old age and the meaningful and happy and long life, etc. But the bottom line in the end of the show is we all do still rely on God. The world isn't perfect, or at least the way we think it should be is perfect. The world still runs on the rules set forth by God, and we need to recognize that and understand that the ultimate judgment is God's. And that's really, I think, the best way to understand this final verse as sort of a slight counterweight to the rest of the chapter. It's kind of recognizing reality. Anyway, this concludes chapter 16 of Proverbs. Again, a chapter full of incredibly beautiful things and thoughts and things that should carry us through the day. Each and every verse is something that can carry us through the day. So I'm sorry that I have to learn so many verses in one day, but we'd be doing this forever if I just did one verse a day. But have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you so much for participating. Feel free to email me if you have comments at weinrebsaul@gmail.com. That's WEINREBSAUL@gmail.com, or you can comment in any of the public forums where this appears. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.